I started to realize when I came here is that there is a sense of belonging that I have here that even as somebody who was born in Canada, I just, me personally, have never felt that same sense of belonging.
Mhm.
Um, and so yeah, it's been several times, and it being here is comforting in a lot of ways. I feel like a lot of us come to have a sense of ease,
Mhm.
and it's partially because of that cultural, ancestral community connection that we can make here.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm super excited because I have Amma here with us, and she's going to tell us all about her story and her personal journey into entrepreneurship and what she does in Ghana. So I'm super excited and I cannot wait to get started. So Amma, welcome. Good afternoon.
Good
Uh,
afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for accepting the invitation. I read your bio and I was like, oh my God, I need to have Amma on the show. You know,
Oh my
I've been
goodness.
thinking about doing this series for a very, very long time, but because of my busy schedule, it just didn't
Mm,
happen. And I don't believe in accidents. As soon as I got into the group and I saw the caliber of women and
mm,
the like-mindedness and the connection, I
yeah.
was like, if there are any women in the world I want to interview, they're just on a platter for me right now.
Honestly,
So I
you're
was
so
like,
right.
yeah. So thank you so much. So for us to start, I know a little bit about you, but those of you watching don't. Could you introduce yourself a little bit to us today?
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Amma Gyamfowa. I am a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm a friend, but then I am also a therapist and social worker. And so I've been in the field for about 9 or 10 years. And I started my own private practice called Womanist Healing in 2020. And my work and my life in so many ways involves supporting people, allowing them to process their experiences, but hopefully giving them the tools to really listen to their authentic voice, learn how to be compassionate with themselves, because we have a very hard time doing that.
Mhm.
And hopefully just being able to see what their vision is for themselves with their own lens, as opposed to the lens of society or only their family members. So really allowing people to look at themselves differently and live their lives out loud.
Oh my God, I love it. Goosebumps. Everything you said, I relate to so much. And it's kind of been the driving force behind the work that I do with women as well, starting She Tribe, my own community many years ago. And
Mm-hmm.
what I loved is that you said allowing people to live their lives out loud. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
able to live their lives through their own lens, whatever living your best life looks like to you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's so interesting that you said the coincidence thing, because it also just reminded me. I remember when I was getting your emails, I used to run a program for young Black women in Toronto, and I called it the Tribe. And I saw that you that's what you name the folks that follow your blog. And so there's so much alignment in that. But it's such an important thing that we are able to learn, what do I actually do for myself,
Mm-hmm.
because for so long we can be guided by the wisdom of others or what my others want for us, as opposed to listening to what I actually want for myself. So
Yeah, great. So let's start at the beginning. I love to do this with every guest I have here on the show. Tell us a little bit about Amma and who she is and how you became the person that you are today. You are Ghanaian from,
mhm.
from what I hear from your name. Could you tell us? I hear an American accent, if I'm not
Yes,
mistaken. So,
close.
or Canadian, maybe?
Yeah, yeah.
North
So
America.
yes, exactly. Yeah. So I grew up, I was born and raised in Toronto,
Mhm.
Canada. So I grew up there in the east side of Toronto, which is the area called Scarborough. And then I moved later on to Ajax. And so what was life like for me? It was interesting because as I grew up, although I grew up predominantly around Black people or in a really diverse area, I was usually the only African girl. But that didn't ever move me away from wanting to be connected to my roots. I've always been really curious about my heritage, understanding my culture. And although it took me a long time to grasp my language, it's just always been a space for me to feel empowered, especially when you live in a place like the West and you often don't always see yourself as the majority.
Mhm.
You really are looking consistently for images that represent you in a way that feels empowering. And so that's something that I think throughout my life I was looking for.
Mhm.
And then in terms of how I got here, I think, part of what brought me to the work that I'm doing in the world now is just the challenges that I've seen people go through. And it always made me empathetic, and I always knew I wanted to do something. I just didn't know what that looked like until I got older and realized, oh, I can do this through social work. And, originally I wanted to work in women's shelters, and I did that previously. But I, over the years, have just wanted to expand how I support people in different ways. And so I started off in shelters, but then as I just shared, we used to run a mentorship program specifically for young Black women. And then now I'm here running my own private practice. So the journey of life takes you on an interesting path, and you just have to allow yourself to go on it.
Yeah, I love that. And how was it for you being a Ghanaian, an African woman growing up in Canada, years ago?
I guess it's quite complicated. I think that although we have a quite strong Ghanaian community, I would say, I think part of the challenge is that typically you're only getting to connect with your community. Well, let's say if you're going to a faith-based space, so a church or a mosque, and I think sometimes that doesn't give you the opportunity to talk about what are some of the challenges that people are experiencing, and just building community in a different sense. And so for me, once again, I grew up like as the only African girl in my neighborhood community. So I know for a long time, people would try to tease or like make fun of, and it never bothered me because I always felt really strong in my identity. But I know for a lot of other people that wasn't their experience, and it actually caused a lot of struggles for them.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the reason why over time it's been such a ongoing theme for me to try to return to my roots and kind of connect to the knowledge of my people, because it has felt like such an empowering thing to know, oh, even my name can be the center of something, right? When I tell people my name in Ghana, it's like, oh, your name is so beautiful. There's not these weird questions as to, oh, why is that? And are you sure your name's not Emma? And, all those little things that can happen. So yeah, that's I guess a little bit about my experience growing up in Canada as an African person.
Yeah. You mentioned that, as when people would tease you or make fun of you, because there are movies like Black Panther now, and everybody wants to be African.
Yeah.
People see stuff about what Accra looks like or what life in Ghana supposedly look like every day. But they think, oh, Ghana is so much fun. Yes, it is, but it's not just that.
Of
Back in
course.
the days, it wasn't cool to be African. It wasn't cool to be Black. And you said you were kind of resilient towards that, or it didn't hurt you as much. Where do you think you get that from?
I call myself a self-proclaimed nerd. Like I was a nerd when I was younger, in the sense that I always loved books. I always loved, like I could get lost in a book very, very easily. And so at a really early age, I was always interested in like the history of African people. And I I feel like I use that as a space of or a source of strength. Um, and I just honestly, I just didn't have any shame around my identity, especially because, as I was mentioning earlier, a lot of us connected to our culture through a faith space, right? And so for me, on Sundays, I would go to an all Ghanaian church. And so I got the opportunity to kind of see myself and my community as a space of celebration. And so I think by virtue of having those spaces, even though I might have experienced some challenges within school or what have you, going to those places recharged me. We had like these massive picnics during the summer where you get to be with all these other African Ghanaian kids, and then plus on Sundays you'd go to church and be at Sunday school. So you got the opportunity to kind of connect with yourself and your community in a different way. And I think that probably had a lot of ways of recharging me in a way that I didn't maybe realize when I was younger. But now that I think about it as I'm older, it probably really did help kind of just keep me solid and keep me grounded.
Yeah. When you were living in Canada, did you often travel back to Ghana with your family, or did you only travel to Ghana as an adult?
The first time I came to Ghana I was 11, 12. And then I didn't come back until I was like 21. So quite a bit of time in between. And so this is my fourth or fifth time actually being in Ghana. So I haven't been here as often as some people, especially with Canada. It is a very long journey. And what it requires to come here, of course, especially when you have family here, is a lot. So it's not a trip that I used to make often. But I remember even the first time I came, I was so surprised as to how much family I had here. it was the first time I got to see one of my grandmothers, and I, God rest her soul, she passed away. But I looked just like her. And so there was all these little things that I was like, wow, like there's a whole other world for me, is what I started to realize when I came here, is that there is a sense of belonging that I have here, that even as somebody who was born in Canada, I just, me personally, have never felt that same sense of belonging.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, it's been several times, and it being here is comforting in a lot of ways. I feel like a lot of us come to have a sense of ease,
Mm-hmm.
and it's partially because of that cultural, ancestral, community connection that we can make here.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I can relate to a lot of the things you say on so many levels. I was born in Germany, raised in Belgium, and I only went to Ghana, at least that I can remember, when I think the first time I was probably 24.
Wow.
And then the second time I actually moved there. So I
Okay.
moved
Wow.
in when I was like 27 or something. So a couple of
I
years
love
after
that.
that.
Yeah.
And I lived there for 3.5 years. And that was the second time I had been in Ghana.
Wow.
And I moved
Wow.
pretty
Yeah.
quickly, and it was a sense of coming home. Even though I didn't grow up there, I had extended family, but I didn't have really like a place where I could call home. But I felt
Hmm.
at home as
Yeah.
soon as I got there. You know, what I loved the most was billboards that had Black people on it. Little
Yeah.
like, oh my God,
Yeah.
on the billboards.
Definitely, definitely. It's all, and that's the thing. It's like until you come here, you don't realize what you are missing, because
Exactly.
that becomes the norm. You not being on every single advertisement is the norm when you are in the West, and then when you come here, it's like, oh no, we can be at the center of everything.
Yep, yeah, yeah. And that's exactly that feeling, like you get used to being a minority, or like
Hmm.
just part of the thing, but not like at the center of everything. Not that it's
Hmm.
not in a like selfish way, like, oh, I want to be, or egoistic way, like I want to be at the center, attention or everything. But it's just like, wow, I don't have to justify anything. I just can blend in a way.
Absolutely.
And it was
Absolutely.
lovely. It was really
Yeah.
lovely to have that
Yeah.
experience. So tell me about, the work that you do. Did you always know you wanted to do this work? You talked a little bit earlier about how you knew you always wanted to help,
Hmm.
and you were looking for ways how to translate that, what exactly that
Hmm.
would look like.
Hmm.
Tell us about, how that really started, and do you feel like you created something that you were lacking? So not necessarily only wanting to help others, but something that you maybe wished was there, that you, when you needed it, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. This is such an interesting question. So it comes from many different places. So to answer one of your questions, yes, this is always something I know I always wanted to do, but I also always wanted to write. But as an African child, sometimes your parents, it's hard for them to support that creative juice that you might have in you. But to be quite honest, the reasons why I got into my field of work was really actually out of just some of the painful experiences I witnessed, in particular for women who experience violence. Um, in my community, there was two women in particular that really unfortunately had just really abusive partners, and really really suffered as a result. And I remember being very angry when I heard about their stories and their experiences, and I knew if that's how I felt, I can only imagine how their children felt. And I just wanted to make sure that they had a safe space, a place where they could feel like they could process their experiences, and then also getting their power in one way or another, especially after living through really traumatic incidents like that. And so
Mhm.
that's why I was so committed to working in shelters in particular, because when folks are fleeing violence, that's often a place that they might go.
Yeah.
But to answer your second question, I had the opportunity of building a mentorship program, and that is definitely something that I wish I had. So I did in many ways kind of create something that I needed as a young Black girl, young African girl growing up. I didn't realize how much I needed it until I was actually facilitating the program and realizing what it was able to offer. Because for so many of us, whether it be that we don't have a safe space in our house, whether it be that we feel teased or excluded in school, whether it be that we are just really looking to explore ourselves, that program really offered me the ability to speak to young Black women, to encourage them, and to give them a place where they can feel seen. And I think that's what you were talking about when we were just mentioning the aspect of advertisements. It's the fact that we want to be seen, we want to be affirmed, we want to be not judged. I think oftentimes, especially in the West, there's this idea that Black women are angry, but it's like nobody's actually trying to hear what it is that we're saying. And so my work has allowed me to do both, of helping people in really difficult situations to process some of their experiences, to go on a healing journey, but then also creating spaces that I never had that probably would have helped me make a lot more good, healthy choices and decisions. But it's okay because I'm able to offer that space to other young Black women and African girls.
Yeah, in the work that I do as a coach, a lot of the clients that come to me either come to me at the idea stage where they're thinking, I think I want to do something with my life where it combines, something I love and something I'm good at and, something, but I just don't know what. And I always tell them, what would that little girl in you need? At the end of the day, our first customer, our first client is us. The person that didn't get what they needed to heal.
Absolutely.
And healing could look different. There are different ways to heal, but just different things that would have made their journey so much more bearable or enjoyable, whatever it is, allow them to expand and live a full life.
Absolutely.
And I feel like that's something you've been able, and I always say that, and also obviously what community or causes trigger you. You're like, oh my God, when I hear this, I just want to help. I have to do something about it. I lay awake at night thinking about ways that I can help make a change. And I think when people can combine those two things, you have the secret sauce.
Absolutely. I love that. The secret sauce. I'm going to start calling it that.
And it's really, I think, that sweet spot where you find what you're good at, what you really love doing and what makes you feel like, wow, I'm fulfilled doing this. It makes my heart and my soul happy. And I think you have found that, wouldn't you say?
I definitely do. I definitely feel that. Even the fact that once again we were able to do this interview, I've been in Ghana for only a few months. It's like a testament to that. And I think it's interesting. I was having a session yesterday, and because I'm a creative person, I am often like really trying to encourage and nurture that in some of the clients and the people that I support. And so many of us are deterred from that creative path. And I think there is something so beautiful about listening to that voice, even when it's difficult or even when other people are telling you not to. And so maybe that's one thing I want to encourage people that might be listening to is like, if that thing feels scary or what have you, but it still feels like such a space of joy for you, allow yourself to explore it because you never know what can happen,
Exactly.
So many people were so fearful about me coming here and living, and I've been doing amazingly. Things have been going great. Things, of course, are not always perfect. I definitely have experienced my challenges, but I couldn't have asked for a better experience. So, but you won't do that or know that unless you try, unless you allow yourself and give yourself the permission to try.
Exactly. And I think, people don't always they don't wake up and say, okay, today's the day I'm going to do this, or this is exactly what I'm going to do. But you want to keep that fire alive. You want to keep fueling it. And so, as you said, keep that creativity alive. If it's, drawing, writing, cooking, taking pictures, whatever it is, keep doing it, keep cultivating that thing in you so that when you are ready, it can take any shape or form. I remember when I started She Tribe, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew that I wanted to work with women. I knew that I cared about holistic living, full living, authentic. And I loved traveling and, bringing women together. So I was like, okay, I don't think that's a job description. I don't think I can find that on LinkedIn or something. So I was like, okay, I'm going to cultivate whatever I need to learn to be able to serve in each of these spaces. So I want to bring women together. What do I want? How do I want that to look? So I started working on little things, taking courses here and there, certifications here and there, and then putting it together bit by bit, what it is now. And, the coaching business that I have aside. But it's really, people think it's an overnight thing, but it's about taking little steps towards that
Absolutely.
dream, making it a reality, and sometimes pivoting and taking a different route, but it's about doing
Yeah.
something. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. I love that you break that down because I think, part of the struggle, of course, is that it feels so overwhelming sometimes. And those baby steps are still steps, those
Yeah,
small wins are still wins. And it's so important that we can look at it like that as opposed to only thinking, okay, once I have 100,000 followers on YouTube, then that's the only way that success can look like. And that's not the
yeah.
case, right?
That's
How
not.
do you get to 100K before you get to 5K
Yeah,
or 1,000, right?
yeah, 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 yeah. So tell us a bit more about how you support these women, because you worked in shelters before. Now you have your own practice. How long have you had your practice? Walk us through that evolution of your work.
Yeah, well, because I'm a social worker by trade, and a large part of many types of traditional social work includes some form of counseling. So
Yeah.
since I've been in the field, I've counseled in shelters, via phone crisis lines. In the work that I was doing with young Black women, of course, it required some one-on-one counseling as well. And then of course, counseling has always been an interesting space. And in particular, especially when you think about the needs for Black communities, especially in places like Canada and Toronto, there's such limited Black therapists and folks who are doing it from a culturally centered lens. Because it's one thing to be counseling people, it's another thing to be only using Western tools to do so, right?
Exactly.
And so what my support looks like with people is providing one-on-one counseling. I'm a holistic counselor, so I definitely try to use different modalities because every person is looking for something different. And I don't believe in like, this is the only way that we're going to get to some of your goals. So part of it is that one-on-one individual counseling, really sitting down and exploring with people what is bringing them to therapy, what is it that they're hoping to unlearn, unpack, process, and what is it that they have for themselves as dreams, right? Some of the first questions I ask people when I'm doing my intake is, what are the things that you're scared to say out loud? What are the things that are calling you that you feel nervous to answer? And I always ask a question about, what do you identify as your strengths? And this is the question that everybody has the hardest time with.
Mm-hmm.
And I know so much of therapy is about unpacking your difficulties and traumas, but a large part of therapy is also getting a better understanding of what your strengths are, what your
Mm-hmm.
wisdom is, so that
Yeah,
you're moving in the world in a way that's reflective of that. And so you feel solid and grounded in who you are.
I love that.
Um, yeah, in addition to the individual one-on-one counseling, I provide group workshops. So a lot of what we sometimes miss is the fact that, of course, one-on-one therapy is so critical for people, but we also deeply, deeply heal in community. And so, providing workshops for organizations, bringing people together, allowing us to have these honest, open conversations, but really breaking down some of the stigmas we have around mental health
Mm-hmm.
is something that is a big passion of mine, because to be honest, I think so many people are going through so many different things, and yet the ability for us to talk about it can be so hard for so many reasons. And I think the pandemic really helped us to finally kind of begin breaking some of that wall down.
Yeah.
And so it's a matter of, how do we continue to pour into it when the pandemic is not impacting people in the same way?
I love that you brought that up about the pandemic and how it has helped us kind of recognize our need to,
Mm-hmm.
unpack things. Do you
Mm-hmm.
feel like, because I know that on a global scale that is true, but
Mm-hmm.
within our communities, do you feel that, your parents, aunties, uncles, cousins, do you feel
Mm-hmm.
like that's a reality for them as well? At least people in
Mm-hmm.
Ghana, let's say in Ghana even.
Yeah. So if I could be honest, I feel like it's easier for me to talk a little bit more about the Toronto context, and
Mm-hmm.
then I can come to the Ghanaian context in a second. Um, so in Toronto, there's an organization called the Ghanaian Canadian Association
Yeah.
of Ontario, GCAO, and they did a lot of work in the pandemic to provide different workshops, events that talked about mental health. And so the first event that we did was in 2020. I think it was in May. We had 100 people come online, which is a lot.
Yeah.
And I've been doing work in the Ghanaian community, volunteering at different organizations. We've had events about, healthy families. And honestly, I can easily say less than 20 people came.
Yeah.
So to have 100 people come online, parents, aunties, uncles, just listening to the information, I think for me was such a testament that people are being forced to reckon with themselves in a different way.
Yeah.
Throughout the pandemic, whether it be that people lost their jobs, people felt isolated, you're now having to like deal with your family in a different way. You don't have the escape of work in the same way. We're dealing with this global health crisis. It forced us to think about, okay, what do I actually need on an everyday basis in a different way? And so even though it's still something that isn't as talked about on an everyday, I do think we're definitely making headway in places like Toronto and maybe other spaces in the West. In Ghana, there are some amazing organizations that are doing work in the mental health space. I can't necessarily speak to what things have looked like in the pandemic, but hopeful in Como, they actually have a festival happening this Sunday, actually.
Yeah.
And there's also a mental health directory. So I think organizations like that have been trying to just allow people to see how we're connected to mental health, because that's the bigger struggle, is that for so long mental health was actually seen as mental illness. And so what is that we're trying to reword how people look at it. How do we understand you have your physical health just as you have your mental health, right? That every single person walking has their mental health and well-being. And when we're able to word it like that, people then can slowly come into the conversation and then consider, okay, how do I take care of my mental health, right?
Yeah, I love that. And I think that for us, some of the things have to start in the diaspora for it to move and come, take more space locally, I'd say, or echo a bit more. Sometimes it's the other way around. Things have to happen on the ground, and then it gets a lot of attention, and then people in the diaspora pick it up and amplify it. So I think this is probably one of the conversations that is going to be, from one side to the other each time until we meet in the middle. But I remember joining a conversation once with a client of mine who's a therapist as well, and she talked about, in our communities, sometimes there's no word, there's no translation for even not say what mental health is in Tree, Bani, and all these languages. It's very hard for people to grasp what it means. And even us in English, then still people would think if you say mental health, oh, I'm not crazy. Maybe now more and more people are like, okay, mental health is not mental illness, as you say.
Exactly.
It can be,
Absolutely.
So I think there's a lot of work to be done, and it's beautiful that it's starting. And how does that look like for you? Like, let's say someone comes to your platform on Instagram. How does someone recognize that, hey, I'm having mental health issues that I need to look at? How can you take care of your mental health? Maybe that's a better question.
Yeah, I think we often, unfortunately, because we're so used to neglecting it, we often come to that realization in crisis.
Yeah.
So let's talk about on an everyday, right? Of like, what are the things that you can do that can feed yourself? Whether it be mentally. So for example, what are some of the things you do to recharge, right? I think that's a really good place to start, because it can allow you to remember that I need to pause, right? Whether it be that you're a mom, that you have a job and a million things to do, or a partner, or what have you. Like, what are the things that allow you to feel full can be a perfect place to start about just touching on and caring for and nurturing your mental health in general.
Yeah.
When it comes to challenges around your mental health, I want people to think about, are you feeling burnt out? And sometimes we could be so used to that feeling that it actually just feels like we're feel fine. But really, really consider, like, how does my body feel on a day-to-day? Am I feeling a sense or a level of dread when it comes to basic everyday things that used to maybe give me joy or I would have some pleasure around? I also want people to maybe interrogate their thoughts, right? I think one of the things that people really began to realize in the pandemic is how harsh they could be with themselves, right? Yeah. And I'll give myself as an example. I was doing something, I was like, oh my God, you're so stupid, and just as a natural random thought. And I was like, wait a minute, why would I say that to myself?
Yeah.
And so really kind of slowly beginning to catch how you're talking to yourself can also be an indicator. But then I also really look at therapy as a space that allows people to have a listening ear, somebody that is able to support them. And so whether it is that you're going through challenges or not, it can be really, really beneficial for folks to be able to have that access. And so for every, this is a difficult thing to share in terms of resources because every space that access looks different, right?
Mm-hmm.
But as a starting point, following therapists, oftentimes folks will share information about how to get, free resources if that's what people need, or if they're able to access private resources, then that's another possibility as well.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that, because I think, we don't get that from our household, like our communities. The mindset and the way we talk to ourselves most of the time is the way our parents talk to us, or our parents
Absolutely.
talk to each other, or people in our
Absolutely.
community. So it's really hard for people to stop that and even recognize that there's a problem. And so, as you said, these are the few things you can, like, how do I talk to myself? What are the things that I enjoy that, and, stress, when we look in, our community versus, Caucasian community, Black women are super stressed, and
Of course.
our stress hormone is super high, and it's killing us way more than it's killing non-Blacks, because we're just constantly so stressed that we don't even know we're stressed. We're all walking around like that.
Yeah.
And it's thinking about your physical discomfort. I remember growing up, I used to have, and I still have, I think I wear my stress in my shoulders, having very tense indication
Yes.
that you're
Yes.
stressed, or that you're clearly above stressed at that time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I remember, I think it was Oprah that said sometimes God will send you a sign, and if you don't listen, then the whole, it would be like in the form of a brick falling on your head, and the sign
Absolutely.
will be a building collapsing on you, because if you rest,
Mm,
your body will force you to rest. And
absolutely.
I think there's a little things, being more kind of in tune with yourself, like, how are my shoulders right now? How am I responding to things?
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
bit by
It's
bit.
such yeah, it's so important that you name that, because as I was saying earlier, we can become so immune to it, right? As you said, since you're young, you kind of realize that, oh, I carry a lot of my stress in my shoulders. And because we become so used to dismissing that feeling, we think that that's how we're actually supposed to be feeling, when
Yeah.
that's not the case. It's our
Mhm.
body trying to connect to you and recognize, no, I need some attention. I need something from you.
Yeah.
And as somebody who is a therapist, I often find that after we begin to have our sessions, there's some physical ailments that they start to realize. And so now they're starting to, yeah. And so now it creates this trickle down effect of, oh, maybe I should go to my doctor and get a physical and, do all these other things that are for my health. And one of the things that I wanted to say, just in connection to what you were saying about Black women and stress, is really redefining what strength looks like, right? And you began to say, which is so true, is that oftentimes we talk to ourselves the way other people have spoken to us, whether it be our parents or other care providers. And, one thing that I think has really been very detrimental to Black women is this idea of what strength means, right? That strength is supposed to be that we just kind of power everything through, and that we don't cry, and that we don't have emotions. And, the world put that on us. But I think it's important that we dismantle that so that we are able to take care of ourselves, right? Because part of that idea of strength isn't allowing us to get the support that we need, whether it be from our personal circles or whether it be from professionals as well. So really redefining strength for ourselves can be such a new way for us to start that journey of taking care of ourselves holistically.
Beautifully. And I think, a friend of mine said that she stopped using the word resilience when she
Mm,
makes a list about the strengths she has or the good things about her. She
mm,
used to say, I'm a very resilient person. Now she says,
mhm.
it's a bad word for me. I don't add that. I don't
I
want
love
to
that
be
she says
resilient.
that.
I don't want to be resilient. So for me,
Yeah.
another thing that I use is vulnerability. Like, I want to be vulnerable.
Mm,
And
mm,
it's been like such a bad word, like, oh, you don't want to be crying in
mhm.
public. We don't, but
Yeah,
that's not what it is. People always dramatize
of
being
course.
emotional. It's like, oh, you're
Yeah,
too emotional. Why the two? Why
yeah.
is two attached to it? As if
Mm,
that thing. It means you're alive. so
absolutely. I love that. It means that you're alive. Absolutely.
so thank you so much for sharing that. And could you talk to us a little bit more about how, with our communities, how we can do that as women? Because it all starts in a way with the mothers, right?
Mm,
How can we, within, with our sisters, with our kids, work on mental health as more as a prevention, like something that you do to just stay fit, just like you go to the gym, eat healthy, and work out. How can we, proactively do these things at home and with our family and friends?
Yeah, I think how you started off by saying the word vulnerability, I think is actually probably one of the most critical things, right? I think for many of us, part of that challenge was that sometimes, our parents didn't know how to have certain conversations. And so that means that we didn't have certain conversations. But now we can recognize that mental health is a part of our health, right? And so being able to be vulnerable with your children and ask them how they're feeling, ask them how school is going, ask them what's challenging, like what is difficult for you, and slowly beginning to bridge that gap can be a really, really helpful way that we begin to kind of feed the mental health of the next generation. And then when you think across, right, I guarantee you 9 times out of 10, if I asked you how you're doing, you're automatically going to say you're fine. Right. And in the workspace, that might be okay. But sometimes when we're talking to a sister, when we're talking to a friend, like how genuine and transparent are you when you are actually going through difficult times, right? When things are not always good. Really being able to have that sense of openness can allow people to feel comfortable enough to share what's happening so that we actually can support one another, right? Because part of the struggle with that idea of strength is like, I'm always supposed to be good. Everything is always supposed to be good. And I can't share that I'm having a hard day or having a hard time or I'm feeling like a failure, right?
Yeah.
And so we have to be able to have safe spaces within our interpersonal relationships so that folks are feeling comfortable to share when they are having challenges.
Yeah.
And then also one of the things that I think is helpful is for people who maybe have started therapy or are interested in it, sharing resources, right? I know therapy sometimes isn't always accessible for everybody, but let's say you're following a therapist on Instagram, for example, and you see in a really amazing resource that they placed on their page, share it with somebody that you know that could help. That's one way to start the conversation. That's one way to dismantle the stigma. Sometimes we think it has to be like these big, huge things, but those small interactions can really allow us the sense of freedom and being able to just really unlearn what we might currently think about when it comes to our mental health.
Yeah, I love that. And as you were speaking, it reminded me of, when George Floyd was killed at work in my 9 to 5. Like a lot of the large companies, they have a Black ERG, like a group for Black employees or empowerment or
Okay.
inclusive diversity, whatnot. And my company where I work, they did something like that. So our CEO sent an email about basically taking a stance on this, saying that it's not okay and that Black lives matter. Our company was one of the few that did that publicly. But I felt like, okay, so that's it. So we had I think our stand up virtually, and they didn't say anything about that. And I was like, well, hold up a second. Like you just gonna act like we didn't get this email? Like what's going on here? Like how is everybody? And they just started with the meeting. I was like, I actually have something to say. Like, aren't we gonna take a moment to acknowledge this email and share how we're all feeling about this? And as I was explaining, I broke down in tears because I was not okay. I was not okay. And I was like, but I'm the only Black woman at work. So I realized, so this thing doesn't hit home for you as much as it does for me. Or what is this? It's another human being who's been killed. And yes, we've gotten an email, but this is not far. Because, a lot of the Belgians would act like, oh, wow, America, this is always happening. There's really bad. Okay, let's move on. It doesn't happen here. But I'm like, yeah, people don't get gunned on the streets, but gun emotionally probably every day.
Of course.
So we need to talk about this. And for me, it was a vulnerable moment, being able to openly share about that. And it was passionate. So there were tears, but I got so many emails from colleagues afterwards thanking me for opening up because it allowed them to see their privilege. And I asked them, have you checked on any of your Black friends? And I said, to be honest, I'm sure you don't even have any Black friends. I'm the only Black person you know. Let's be honest. Let's be honest here. I'm the only person that you know. So let me have this conversation with you because you're not going to have this chance. And they thanked me. And I was able to even go and speak to management and have a workshop around inclusiveness and diversity. And I was like, wow. So sometimes you need to be vulnerable and share that everything is not okay. As you said, to
Yeah.
invite others into the conversation, but for you to take a stance, for others who may
Mm,
fear to speak up, to say, I'm not feeling good, but it's not appropriate because it's in a workspace. I'm supposed to be smiling,
mm,
whatnot.
mm,
And I think,
yeah.
this idea that you can't be too emotional, you can't, you just have to hold your composure all the time. No,
Yeah.
so,
No, absolutely. I mean, like you saw me snap when you were talking because George Floyd's passing really unearthed so much, right? For us as Black people who live in the West in particular, we already knew like this is something that is already a everyday part of our lives, but it was the timing and like there was so much that happened there, and we don't get the opportunity to talk about enough racial trauma and what that does, right?
mhm,
And even for the fact that I live in Canada, you live in Belgium, and we each feel that experience so deeply, so deeply. And the fact that, of course, I'm going to be emotional about this. This man looks like my husband. He looks like my father. He looks like my cousin, and it could have been any one of them. And it brings us all to this place. And I think one of the things that's so important is that we name it as racial trauma, because it's not just, oh, this one incident of police brutality. No, this is an ongoing experience of trauma that Black folks in particular have consistently experienced. And like you said, for some of us, it ends up being an emotional wound, but some of us, it's physical. Um, but either way, it hurts our lives, it hurts our well-being, and we have to be able to have those conversations about how do those things make us feel,
yeah.
um in order to be able to have a grounding of what's next for us and what it is that we need going forward.
Yeah, I think just the honesty, as you said, sharing how you feel, whether it's at work with your friends, and just saying, no, I'm not having a good day today. And I think people feel a bit overwhelmed thinking you have to like unload your luggage on people. We're not asking you to blur like everything.
Yeah,
We're saying it's okay
yeah,
to say, I actually didn't sleep so well, so I'm not having a good day today. That's a
yeah,
first step instead of
absolutely.
saying, oh, I'm good, because you're not.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think the other part of it is, who are the safe people, right? Because
Mhm,
even the fact, I love the fact that you use the word tribe. Who is your tribe? Who is in your tribe? Because, for some people, they don't feel safe enough to share certain things at work, and that's okay too. But there has
mhm.
to be somebody in your corner, somebody in your space, somebody in your connection that you feel comfortable sharing something with,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
I tell my clients all the time, you see me for 1 hour, let's say every 2 weeks, every month. You need people in your life that you can share not just the challenges, but also the joys of life with as well, right? That
yeah, yeah.
it's really important that we could have that balance of both.
Yeah, and that's why for me, I think with the work that I do, I tell my clients that the more you can merge the person you are at work and the person you are for real, the better it is.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's sad that if you don't find someone, if you can't be yourself fully at work or in other spaces,
Mm-hmm.
and you're spending most of your time there, what does that do to your mental health and to who you are?
Absolutely.
Then it's time to
Absolutely.
maybe rethink where you spend your time and who you spend your time with and the work that you do. Maybe it's not bringing you as much joy, even if it's bringing you
Mm,
enough money. Maybe it's time to
mm,
consider, because what's the price you're paying for being in
abso-
those spaces that so many
absolutely.
years? So
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I love that. I love that that's the question that you ask people. I think it's a really important one.
Thank you. So tell us a little bit about your practice.
Yes.
I love the name, Womanist.
Yes, yes, yes. And so people always like, what does that mean? And so for people who don't know, womanist is a term coined by Alice Walker. And it basically means somebody who centers the experiences of Black women. And when I think about my own personal journey as a young woman and the things that liberated me, I remember reading like Black feminist books and being like, oh my God, like, yes, like I understand it. Like somebody gets me. And so and especially as growing up as a young Black woman, a young African woman, I think I just always wanted to be seen and affirmed. And I wanted my practice to be a reflection of that. I wanted Black women to be able to have a space where we can talk about, yes, their personal experiences, but also connect it to the larger systems, right? Because I think sometimes, as you mentioned, like we can feel, if we use the example of your workspace, that is a collective experience that Black women face. And you don't have to meet another Black woman to know that there's likely a chance that she has experienced something similar to you. And so for me, it's about kind of how do we merge your personal experiences with some of the larger experiences that Black women face in the African diaspora and at home. And then how do we look at your life as a way for you to live out your dreams despite some of these challenges, right? Because the challenges unfortunately will come, but how do we make sense? How do we make meaning of your life in a way that feels good to you? And then how do you begin to listen to your voice, you know? As African children, especially, and I think you talked about it earlier, the reality is that, of course, we have a reverence for our parents, and the way our culture is, we really celebrate the knowledge of our elders and our parents. But sometimes what ends up getting lost is your own voice. And part of my practice is about allowing people to hear what their voice is. You know, a lot of people use the word, I hate the word imposter syndrome. It bothers me so much. I use small girl syndrome. And why I use small girl syndrome is because as an African girl, I feel like for so long, whether it be in my personal relationships or workspaces, this idea of being a small girl, like you're just a small girl, you don't know anything. Like that's something that comes to me, right? And so I hopefully help people in really, although listening to that small girl, learning to stand in the fullness of who they are, right? Learning to be more unapologetic and not shrinking yourself, because so many of us, including myself, have shrank ourselves for very, very long, because we thought it's the proper way. Like that's how I'm supposed to be. That's how I was taught to be, raised to be. That's the only way for me to be respectful. But we don't realize how we betray ourselves in that space, right? And so that's what my work entails. And what I also really try to get people to understand is that there is a unique space that therapy can really open up for them. And it like there's such a combination of it being a mental exercise of you really being able to understand how your mind works, but also this spiritual experience that you get where you're shifting and transforming in so many ways. And as I mentioned before, there's this domino effect about how you will take care of yourself differently once you get into therapy, right? Like when you start to really realize what is impacting you and you become attuned with yourself and you're no longer ignoring your emotions, like we talked about earlier, your whole life will change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does really. Thank you so much. So when did you, would like to shift the conversation to your move to Ghana? How has that been? And how is it for your work, as a business owner? How do you do all of that? How do you manage all of that?
Yeah, it's amazing for me personally, but it's not always, um, it hasn't been the smoothest for my business. So I came in September and I have had some issues with electricity. Not everyone says it's not a lot, but it is a lot for somebody who's working from home. But it's been manageable. So I've still been able to see my clients one-on-one, which is great. I've done, so I usually do more workshops, but because of some of my struggles with the outages, I'm just really fearful of like having, too many people online and it not working out. But I think one of the greatest things about being here is that it is reconnecting me to my why and my purpose, which is really great for, of course, for my business. And then also just being here, I think is shifting me and reminding me that home is where the heart is. And I really want to be a part of supporting some of the mental health stuff here. So I'm still on a journey of figuring out what things are going to look like, but it's been really great so far. I don't have any regrets. It's been something that I've been wanting to do personally for a long time, so I know it'll impact my business positively, but it's hard to say all of what has taken place so far, if that makes sense.
Yeah, completely. It makes sense. Do you have any tips or advice for anybody who is thinking about, either starting their own business, shifting, or even moving abroad like you did? What kind of advice would you give them?
Listen to your gut. I think that this move is a 10-year delayed move because I wasn't listening to my gut. I was listening to other people. And so do not allow other people's fears to be your own, right?
Mhm.
In the short amount of time I've been here, I've been able to book a speaking engagement. I've been able to do an interview with you now. And so much good is coming out of this because I chose to really listen to my gut and to something that has been a dream of mine for a long time. The other thing that I think everybody says when they come to Ghana, but I think can really be applied to anywhere that you're moving, is to really be patient, be flexible, and really try to be adaptable. You
Mhm.
know, there's some things that are generally out of your control. So you really have to, although you might get frustrated. And also here, it's too hot for me to be complaining. Like that's what I feel sometimes is that I just can't, I don't have the ability to be hot and complain at the same time. It's not gonna work. So just really try to give yourself a breath, take a step back, and think about, okay, what is the solution in this moment?
Yeah.
Because then you can operate from a very different place. I've had a lot of difficulties. My laptop wasn't working for a time, which was difficult because I'm, of course, working remotely. Um, but I've had to just roll with the punches. And I think sometimes when you can get so used to, living in a certain way, it doesn't allow you to exercise that muscle of flexibility, but being flexible is a really, really key part of moving anywhere.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And I think Ghana and probably anywhere in the world, but specifically moving to Ghana, a place where things are still kind of developing and changing. If you come with the mindset of I want to have my things now, today, ready, it has to go, 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 you're gonna be very much
Yeah,
disappointed. And yeah,
yeah,
you break and go back as soon as possible. So I think the people that are able and willing to stay longer are those that are able to be flexible, agile, and just take a breath and slow things down. I think Ghana really taught me to slow down. And I used to say, yeah, there's no stress here, but there's a lot of frustration. If you let it come,
yep,
if you let it get
yep,
to you, you
yep,
just scream all day and
yeah.
on the street.
It's so true.
But
It's
we
so
can also
true.
laugh.
It's so true. I love that. Yeah.
Just
And
laugh.
that's what,
Yeah.
honestly, that's what you do. That's what you end up doing. It's like if you don't laugh, you'll cry. So you have to pick one quickly.
Yeah. Oh, I loved it so much. Thank you so much for sharing your story and journey with us. Where can we find you? How can we work with you? Please tell us.
Yes, for sure. So you can find me on a couple places. My website is called womanisthealing.com. You can find me on Instagram at Womanist Healing, and then at Twitter, my first and last name, so AMMAGYAMFOWA. But this has been really, really amazing. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And I cannot wait to, when I'm coming to Ghana, when I get to meet you and hopefully maybe do something together for one of my retreats.
Yes,
I'd love
yes. I
that.
would love that. I would love that so much.
All right. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.